Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at CSL. This was a stock analysis request from one of the followers, and I wanted to let you know that anyone can make these requests and I'll most likely cover them, especially if there is an actionable trade setup to follow. And in the case of this chart, we are looking still for this correction to extend a little bit lower. Now we have a couple of interpretations that I would consider somewhat equally viable. We could be tracking either a larger leading diagonal, in which case I would be tracking a wave 4 correction. We would have managed to reach the ideal target within our wave 3. We can actually even draw this here quickly on the chart. The 138.2% extension of the wave 1 has been achieved, and we are looking at this correction that has been ongoing already for nearly 6 years. And the thing is, again, I expect to go still a little bit lower as we haven't even reached the area of support. Now, the pattern does have some room for additional lows, although I have to say, even getting to the first level of support, the $119, does seem a bit of a stretch unless we get an extension internally within this structure. Now, nonetheless, we are looking for support at the levels between the $119 all the way down to the $21.4 level, and we are looking at the 61.8% retracement for continuation to higher prices. If we break that level, we need to start strongly considering that a more substantial top would be in place, but honestly, I see it struggle to even get to the first level. I don't think that will really be an issue. Now, as mentioning also a couple of scenarios, so additionally, it is technically possible for us to look for something like a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, a series of 1, 2 setups. I have to say, it's not the prettiest interpretation, but in a hyper bullish environment, I could technically see this work out, and we could even make the structures work into actual 1-2 setups. Now, for this interpretation, we would be tracking a slightly different area of support, but the beginning of it would be extremely similar, at the $129 level, the 38.2% retracement instead. Now, we can also add a count for this idea to the chart, and we would expect to form an impulse throughout this structure if this is to play out. Now, the thing is, we are still looking for further continued downside within both interpretations. I cannot guarantee that we will get this set downside. We could be looking for other scenarios if we are to see some signals that a reversal would be occurring, but without such signals, I would not necessarily be considering a position to be ideal until we reach one of these areas of support, if not both. Now, for example, we could track maybe something like a 1, 2, 3, 4th, and 5th that could technically work out, but I would probably just steer away once again until we have some evidence. We see some levels of resistance broken, we see some initial 5 move to the upside that could form. That would be compelling for us to potentially start looking for a position and a more substantial bottom, but as it is right now, I strongly prefer that we extend to even lower prices within one scenario or another. Now, at the same time, on this chart, we see some interesting alternation. So this is a concept where if a wave 2 correction is a very sharp decline, it is very often expected and common for the wave 4 to have more of a sideways development, potentially quite complex, and this seems to be following through quite nicely. Now, in either case, the indicators have seen a significant reset. We would naturally expect after a sharp decline to go even into the oversold territory and be able to start a more significant uptrend from there. That's just everyone taking profits after this more substantial top, potentially triggering stop losses and so on. In this case, we don't necessarily see as much of a push into the oversold territory, but even the sideways consolidation helps lead the RSI into a middle ground, and paired up with some downside, it leads it even deeper into the oversold territory. Now, in this case, we can notice that we should be expecting to be towards the end of a correction within this area, whether it is a wave 4 in yellow or a wave 2 in white, doesn't really matter to me. We are looking for a structure to form in a 3-wave pattern that would reach the area of support. And personally, again, without a signal, I wouldn't be considering an accumulation area to have started before we at least touch the first level Yeah, ideally we get there and we have a full count and we can look for a reversal, but until such is the case, we need to be prepared for further extensions to lower prices. Now, in this correction, we actually have a couple of options, in fact. So I could be looking for this to be a rather simple A, B, C structure, in which case I will be watching for a 5-wave pattern to occur within this wave C to the downside. In such a scenario, we would assume the wave 3 to likely be complete, although extensions are of course possible, but we have already reached the ideal target within our wave 3. I believe we have even a push beyond that. Yeah, we got nearly to the 161.8% extension, but the ideal target has been achieved. And for continuation to lower prices within this scenario, I would be watching the resistance area for a wave 4, which in the case of this chart goes all the way up to the $215. Yeah, we would expect, however, to at least reach the first level of resistance, the $189, which has already been achieved. I have to say, technically the correction could be complete, but based on the proportions of this wave 2, I would not be surprised at all if we get another leg up into the area of resistance. And remember, the ideal target for a wave 4 is the 38.2% retracement. We could perhaps see that be achieved before forming a more significant top within this wave 4 and continuing in this downtrend. Now, the thing is, if we break the 50% retracement, this idea of an impulse forming within this area would not be able to be tracked anymore. Now, in that case, we would need to consider other interpretations, and I would probably be looking for a slightly different count, where instead I would consider maybe this to be a wave A down, a wave B up here, and then a C wave that would extend in this correction. In this idea, we would need to track an ending diagonal in the wave C, where we would have here a 1, 2, 3rd, 4th, and the 5th. In this interpretation, the wave 3 would have achieved its expectations, would have achieved its targets, and wouldn't need to extend any lower. Now, I will hide here a little bit this blue interpretation just to have more clarity over the green scenario. So here we would be watching for a higher level of resistance, a wave 4 within the expectation of a diagonal structure, which allows us to look all the way up to the 61.8% retracement in terms of resistances. Now, this would allow us to look for the area between the $194.6 all the way up to the $247 level. Additionally, if we manage to break also this level of resistance, I would be prepared for a more substantial bottom to be in place even, or at least for a correction, an internal pattern within this structure to be complete. But still, even if we get a break above this level without some clear evidence that a continuation to higher prices is indeed occurring, I would be skeptical, and again, any single pattern could extend. Even if we form here something like a WXY structure, we could see an extension afterwards. We could be looking for another correction and have a larger pattern still in a 3-wave movement to the downside into our areas of support. I would still always be looking on this chart, especially as long as we don't manage to reach the levels of support for the initial 5-wave move to the upside, for a signal that we may have indeed formed a more substantial bottom. And until such is the case, I'll be looking for continued downside. Now, on this chart, we clearly have defined the levels we need to watch in terms of resistance for the patterns to fail. We have the levels of support to watch for potential accumulation, and this is the roadmap that we are focusing on this chart. Once again, the levels of support start at the $128.8 level, at least for one of the scenarios. If we reach the yellow area of support, we would have achieved the minimum for both expectations. In terms of resistance, we are watching for a potential impulse to form within this area against the $215. We are watching for continued downside to still be possible in this structure against the $247 level. In the end, above the 61.8% retracement, something more bullish could be going on, but we will still need a more clear pattern to be able to track a somewhat reliable trade setup, because once again, we would have not reached the area of support. That is why it's going to be difficult to find a high probability trade setup, because from a larger time frame perspective, we would need to be prepared for continued downside. Now, keep in mind, this is no surprise that we have stopped here at this line within our extension to lower prices internally in this structure. Yeah, we have here formed this previous structural support, from which point we extended into the new all-time high territory. We could be looking for similar levels at lower prices, and we see here the 23.6% retracement at the 50% retracement for the white structure. We have here an additional structural support level. Yeah, those are points very likely to help us in forming a bottom in the follow-up extension to lower prices. But for now, this is the roadmap that I have for this chart. These are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.